This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Well, welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Appreciate you joining us here this Sunday. We are live, yes, here in the studio. We are still experimenting with all the new equipment here in the studio, so if you want, you can come on over and join us live over on Facebook Live. We are streaming it today, so feel free to hop on over. We take questions during Facebook Live, so you can ask those questions. As normal, we actually do have guests that are in the studio with us, and so today's guest is actually somebody that I met through an incubator activity, or actually a fitterator activity, I guess would be a better way to say it, is Barry Rudolph, who is the CEO for Velocidata, a company that, well, I'll let Barry tell more about it, but it turns out that actually Barry is, I wouldn't call it neighbor, given that you live a little bit distance away.
It's pretty close, though. Close enough to come down in the studio.
Yeah, in the studio.
Yeah.
So Barry's only the second person to ever actually come live into the studio and be part of the show. So welcome to the studio for one.
It's wonderful to be here. And I guess probably your audience can't actually see this stuff, but it's very cool. It looks a little bit like mission control. This is just pretty neat stuff.
Yeah, it's the listeners have been listening to this whole experience of me building out the studio for probably a little over a year now. So one of these times I actually am going to have to grab a camera and
take a picture of it all,
and shoot it from this direction so that you can actually see everything.
That would be pretty cool.
So Barry, first off, you've got kind of an interesting background, right? You know, you and I both came from big organizations.
Relatively large.
Relatively large.
Yeah.
You spent, 32 years at IBM?
32. You had a short career at IBM. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, as I always tease you, right? Did your prison sentence get reduced?
Yeah, it was cut a little short.
You got commuted for time
normally
served?
It's like a 40-year sentence, yeah, so I made it out 8 years early, yeah.
So tell a little bit about your background. What would you do?
Sure.
Did you go to IBM right out of college then?
I did, yeah. So I first, for all, maybe some of your listeners that are young, I got involved very early. I think I built my first shortwave radio when I was 6. I plugged it in the wall and it tripped all the breakers and blew up. But it was, was the first shot. And I've been kind of interested in technology for a long time. Got a master's degree in electrical engineering and joined IBM out of school. I worked while I was going to graduate school and, joined IBM right out of school.
Yeah.
So.
And then you worked across a couple different groups inside of IBM.
Yeah, I did about everything you can do in a product division. I always joke that I must not have been very good at anything. I kept moving from one thing to another. So, my first part of my career, I did about everything you can do. I did software development, hardware development, ASICs development, field support, quality assurance, tests, about everything you can think of. I was in some functional role in my career.
Well, that's interesting, because in my case, when I came out of college, I ended up getting a mentor who did that on purpose to me, though.
Yep.
Rotated me through and I did sales for 6 months.
Yep.
I worked in the finance department. But for me, it turned out to be great from a perspective of understanding the entire business, not just being a software engineer.
Yeah, this was actually very structured. They moved people through kind of different experiences.
It's kind of the IBM culture, right?
It was very structured. There's very little in IBM at the time that wasn't structured. So it was actually very structured. But it was, like you said, Phil, it was a lot of fun. You learned a lot of different things.
Yeah.
And then the second half of my career was in general management. So I ran businesses for IBM, all really in infrastructure. So I ran the disk storage subsystem business worldwide, and the tape and the backup and archive business.
Tape. So a lot of our listeners might even know that there actually is this thing called
even
tape.
when I ran it, I oftentimes would meet with somebody that go, "You still make those, do you?" Yeah. It was not a huge business. It was over $1 billion though, $1.5 billion.
Well, that's the funny part. You and I were laughing before we went live on the show about how big divisions, right?
Yes.
So at HP, I had 40 billion.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And even then, that's only about a third of HP, kind of a thing. And then, you talk to people about, they're running a $10 million startup and they think it's huge.
Yeah, it's a very, very different experience, and it's big. It's just big, 172 countries, I think, HP, you were saying, did business in
178. That's only because that's all you're allowed to legally operate in.
Yeah.
You can't do North Korea. At the time, you couldn't do Iran.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, there were restrictions. Yep. So the biggest business I ever ran was about $3.5 billion, and I couldn't even really tell you how many people were in it. Maybe 10,000 or so, something like that. So.
Yeah, the scale thing is an interesting, but you know, your career post IBM, my career post HP, though. It is amazing, though, how you can apply that scale experience and just bring it down and from the standpoint of perspective. But it actually does have great application to the smaller companies.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. You know, it's funny. You know, there's so many things you learn through that whole experience, and some of it very structured, like we were talking about. But when you get to smaller companies, even micro caps or small cap public companies, they just don't know that. They've never done it before. So. Right. I joined some boards after I retired from IBM, and then a longer story into Velocidata that we can talk about in a minute, I'm sure. But it was very, very fun, kind of just to apply what you learned in a bigger company to a much smaller company.
So when did you leave IBM?
So I retired at the end of 2010, in November of 2010.
And when did you move? Because the reason Barry and I originally met each other was because you came to Colorado.
Colorado, that's right. Yeah.
So,
and I got your name from somebody, and you agreed to have lunch with me, and as they say, the rest is history.
The rest is history.
Yeah. So we moved shortly after I retired. We moved up to a little town called Estes Park, which is at the entrance to the Rocky Mountain National Park.
Yep.
So I moved from the Bay Area, like you.
Yep.
Where
we're both California escapees.
Yeah, we had real traffic jams, and now my traffic jam is elk crossing the road. So it's a very different world.
You got to be careful.
Yes, that's true.
Those elk are nasty.
That's true. That's very true. Yeah. But very, very enjoyable. It's a beautiful place to live.
Yeah.
Just to enjoy living in Colorado.
So what have you done since you've left IBM now? You said you've been taking some board. I know you've taken some board seats.
Yeah. So I joined about a year after I left. I had some constraints because of the positions I had to not compete.
So you couldn't go help somebody else in the networking group?
I couldn't help. My constraints actually were I couldn't work for anyone in any context that competed with the IBM company, which basically meant I had to work for Jack in the Box or McDonald's or whatever, right? No, it was pretty broad.
Anything that competed with, that's a pretty broad non-compete clause.
That's very broad, yeah. And it was based in New York as opposed to California, so a very different mentality. So it was about a year or so, maybe 2 years even, after I retired, and I joined the board of a microcap, a small NASDAQ-traded company here in Longmont in Colorado, in storage, called Dot Hill Systems.
Well, it's interesting because a lot of people don't know about how strong the storage business is here in northern Colorado.
There's a lot of history here, and a lot of skill and a lot of talent.
Yeah,
and still some great startups that have started and been very successful, some good exits.
Well, it's like HP. HP had the storage division in Greeley, back in the 80s and 90s, and then you had everything from Miniscribe to
storage technology was here. Oracle has a big location here. There's a number of startups. One, SolidFire, just exited to network appliance for a pretty good sum of money. So there's a lot of talent here and a lot of really smart people and a lot of heritage here.
Yeah.
So I joined that board, and when I joined, the stock was about 70 cents a share. We'd actually just got a delisting letter from the NASDAQ, as you do when you go below $1.
I've been through that experience with another company.
It's not a great letter to get. It was the most fun I've had, though, doing something, not that I was the main reason, but we took it from 72 cents a share, and 3 years later we sold it to Seagate Technology for $9.75. So we took it from essentially zero to about $800 million in 3 years.
That's a turnaround.
It was a blast.
Holy Toledo.
And some of the comments you made about applying some things you learned at a big company, some of that was very applicable, and really developed a great strategy, and the team executed amazingly well. So it was just a blast being on that board.
But you were on the board, but you were pretty active, it sounds like.
Yeah, very active. It was a really, really, a very, very good board with really strong people. And the CEO, a guy named Dana Kammersgaard, he used the board very well, which was a big challenge for me because my initial reaction joining a board, having been an operational executive, was to try to manage everything. And you're a board member, you're not the executive.
You're not the executive, you can't make the decision.
But ultimately, he and I developed a very good relationship.
So it's really, in the board that I've been on, it turns into really kind of a coaching, mentoring role.
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah.
So We're going to take a quick commercial break here and pick up the conversation with Barry, get some more stories of of his career, and then I want to get into Velocidata, because I think you guys have got that thing is like on fire from the standpoint of what I've seen of the product and the technology. So we're going to be right back after this quick commercial break, so don't go anywhere. Also, remember, hop on over to Facebook. We are Facebook Live streaming today, so you can ask your questions there. And we'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
We are back, continuing our conversation with Barry Rudolph, CEO for Velocidata, who, like I jokingly said, we said in the last segment, got his sentence reduced for good behavior and got out of IBM.
Got to go out to the real world.
I only had a 10-year sentence at HP, so I was a short timer. I wasn't a repeat offender. But so, post your IBM career, you joined some boards, had some pretty exciting opportunities. Talk us a little bit about Velocidata, where you're CEO now, but you started off on the board side.
Yeah, so I actually joined about the same time as the Hill board. It was a public company. I joined a private company, which was Velocidata, as an independent director. And I'd known the guys that started it for, I don't know, maybe 10 years. I first met them when I was at IBM, and they had a wonderful technological gizmo that they came to see me. And I thought about it embedding it actually in a product. We didn't end up doing that, but we kept in touch with each other. And so I joined their board. I also joined another private company board here in the Boulder area that does tape and backup and archive, which is still actually a big and growing business, believe it or not.
At some point, I run around my office and find an old tape cartridge to show what one looks like.
It may be, It may be hard. A lot of people may not even know that.
I have a stack of punch cards over there.
Oh, do you? Well, those are a little earlier.
Maybe next commercial break, I'll run over and grab some punch cards and show people what those look like.
So I joined the board of Velocidata about 4 years ago, I guess. And about 2 years ago, I got a call from the chairman saying the CEO had resigned and would I help out. Now, keep in mind, I'm up in the mountains and I'm retired, and my wife and I are enjoying retirement. And I'm loving working with companies as a mentor and a coach and as a board member and trying to influence an outcome. It's just fun. It's just a blast at the second part of your career to do something like that. So I get the call, and he asked if I will help out for a short period of time. And I like a dummy, I forgot to ask what a short period of time meant. So that's been about 2.5 years ago. But I've had a blast. It's been a lot of fun. And I can tell you it's every bit as difficult and challenging with 10 people as it was with 10,000 working in a business.
Isn't it amazing?
It's a different kind of challenge, but it is every bit as hard.
It's like at HP, we had 47,000 engineers, and at Cable Labs, total staff, if I counted everybody in, we're maybe 200 tops. But it's just as hard. Just as hard.
Yeah. It's hard for so many reasons. You have no brand. Yeah. I mean, I used to be able to call a customer, and not that I was some wonderful, great, smart guy, but I was a really important supplier. So if I called, they would return my call. They would take the call.
And they take the meeting. Right.
Now from Velocidata, it's who? Who are you?
We don't collect dinosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's humbling in one context, but it's just been a blast. I've learned a lot.
So do you primarily then work remote? or do you? Because where's Velocidata's headquarters?
It's in St. Louis.
St.
Yeah,
Louis.
I mean, a little bit of the history of the company would be interesting. So the company originally started with some work that was being done in Washington University in St. Louis.
Okay.
So that's the heritage. And my link to the guy that started, who actually is our founder, CTO, president of Velocidata, he was doing real basic research in magnetic recording. So I first kind of met him there when I was running the disk subsystem business. And he gave a speech at a conference, and one of his colleagues came afterwards, or several of them, and said, okay, Smarty, now that you can store all this data, what are you going to do with it? How can you compute against it? And it's kind of, if you think about a hard drive, even a hard drive's coming at you in a stream, right? So the challenge was, how can you do really heavy lifting computing on streams of data? And that sparked some work done at the university with a group of PhDs. The university spun a company out that exists today. It's called Exergy. It's in St. Louis. And about 4 or 5 years ago, Exergy spun Velocidata out. Exergy picked one vertical market for the technology, and that's the financial market data on Wall Street and Canary Row and through financial markets throughout the world. So they take in 10 to 15 million messages a second and do some very heavy lifting computing and kind of analytics, et cetera. And then we'll actually either do the trade or pass the data to the trades and do that in a handful of microseconds. So they can take 12, 13 million messages a second and a few microseconds. So the technology is pretty cool stuff. It's
I've heard, or at least I didn't hear it from you, but I've heard it from somebody else that we mutually know about the total dollar value that flows through that system.
Yeah, when I first heard that myself, I thought, that cannot be. I mean, I looked up on Google, how big is the entire equity market? There's $1 trillion, with a T, $1 trillion a day of trading volume that goes through that technology.
Through that technology, $1 trillion with a T, dollars a day. Because I heard that number and I'm like,
can't be.
The skeptical view.
Oh, me too. Right? I thought, okay, I'll just Google and find out if this is baloney or not. And so it turns out that what really drives it is equity market. It's commodity market. It's derivative. And the derivative market is what's huge. If you just look at the equity markets, there's not that much volume. So you got to throw the other pieces in.
So in that case, it's $1 trillion a day. So now you got in the market. Now you're moving it over. So
So basically, what the technology is it's a stream processing system.
Right.
So we're able to take in massive amounts of data in a stream. It's kind of like rather than using the pipe to push the data to the computing, you put the smarts and the computing in the pipe. So as the data is inherently in motion, you operate on it. And if you can do that with enough performance at a low enough cost with no latency, it's just like you've got a really smart wire that doesn't cause any kind of latency at all. And that's what the technology
So you basically are, when you talk about real time or near real time, that's literally what you guys are doing.
It really is, yeah. And obviously you had a lot of latency and you put it in the data path, in the wire, on the wire, that would create problems, right? Yeah. So obviously.
Particularly with trading.
So, with trading, yeah. And these guys, the trading is a very interesting market because they're relatively, they'll take risk, right? And latency equals money. So they'll sell their grandmother for like another microsecond of trading advantage,
Yeah, I've seen them like the traders like between the commodities market or the Chicago Board of Trade in New York, they've actually like trench in a straight line all the way to New York to avoid any kind of bends or out of the way routes or whatever. And they save like 12 microseconds on the transmission.
That's actually a big deal.
Yeah.
So you think about it, if you've got the same algorithm as the guy next to you and you had 12 microseconds longer to trade on it, that could be hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's just phenomenal. So we're gonna take another quick break here. When we come back, I want to talk specifically about the work that you did from taking what was a product that's aimed at the financial services market, and then all that work to try to figure out where that next niche is. Because a lot of people out there maybe have an idea and looking for those adjacencies where the same technology can apply. So we're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. Don't go anywhere. If you've got questions, hop on over to Facebook. We'll answer those during, as we do every week during the commercial break. And we'll be right back. You're listening to Kill Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. We're picking up our conversation with Barry Rudolph, talking about what started off as just for a short period of time, stepping into a CEO role at Velocidata, which is now, what, 2.5 years, you said?
About 2.5 years,
So-
yeah, just about.
So originally the technology had its play in the financial market. You know, today, $1 trillion a day goes through that technology. And your task now is to take that data, or take that system and technologies, and find out what other markets. So
Yeah, exactly.
So how do you go about that? Because there's a lot of people out there that probably have a great idea and they think it's for this market and don't think about its application in other spaces.
Yeah, so that actually was the whole reason for starting Velocidata. So the Exergy board decided to spin out Velocidata and all the IP. We have about 50 US patents, almost 90 worldwide patents, to try to take the technology to a broader set of use cases. So, I wish I could tell you the magic on how you do this. It's actually really hard. The advice I've got is, and this is learn the hard way, is find areas that you think are good fits, test them quickly, get involved with customers quickly so that you can test whether this is a good fit or not. And if it's not, exit and try something else. I think we hung on too long early on. So we've tried a number of things, and the trick is, for us, has been pretty straightforward conceptually. On PowerPoint, it's extremely straightforward. What are a set of use cases in industries that have a financial advantage for speed, or have a lot of data, and that data has so much volume that it's very difficult to compute against it in a standard kind of topology, or really expensive to compute against it. So the first place we actually started was in the enterprise doing what's called ETL type processing, extraction, transformation, and load. And
So basically the front end of data warehousing.
That's right. Yeah.
Right.
And today it's used for a whole bunch of things, including the whole processing steps. So as an example, we just closed a deal with a bank in Europe where we're doing their Basel III regulatory. And we took about 114 hours out of that processing time that they were doing on a lot of hardware with pure software by putting it on one of our systems. Things where there's people involved and time may be important in terms of, so the very first system we sold was actually to a healthcare company, and it would go something like this. The system they had in place, if you went to the hospital or the doctor, Phil, and you were on your way home and you called them to their call center, it took them something like 16 hours to integrate all that data that came from the field. So when you called on your way home and said, was that covered or what was, they wouldn't know. They had no clue. They'd say, call back tomorrow.
So they had like an 18-hour lag.
That's right. So
from the real data to before it got into the system and usable.
And it wasn't because of the transmission of the data from the field, it was the computing time that it took to actually get it done. So we put one of our systems in and we took a 16-hour process down to 45 seconds. So we actually sold something to them. It was very nice. Actually.
I couldn't even get into the car.
No, you wouldn't.
Seconds.
Yeah, you'd still be trying to figure out where your car was in the parking lot, right? So it's those kind of applications. So the process we've gone through is to look for use cases in industries where we think there's value in time. There's a lot of data. We're not a system that's going to get sold to Joe's pet store directly, and that processing the data creates a value proposition like on Wall Street. And
so if I tried to extract this or generalize it, it's really about finding the maybe two unique characteristics of whatever the product or technology is, and then try to look for those adjacencies that have a similar kind of characteristics.
That's right.
But you got to be a little careful about not being so specific in the characteristics.
Yeah.
That the only thing it matches is your existing customer.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the same time, you don't want to be so broad where everybody could become a customer.
Yeah. Well, I think we had a couple of other variables that have proved challenging for us, but really important. And that is how repeatable is it? So assuming that you are a product company, and we're a product company, you you can find things where you could be a service company with a tool, very labor intensive, and sending people out to do very unique coding. But in the product business, it's what is this repeatable or not? So that's the other variable that we've spent quite a bit of time on. Is this a repeatable process that has value, et cetera, that time and speed and/or the volume of data
right?
is
Because
important.
if you go in and you solve the problem and you solve it one time, then it's not like they're going to buy. They may rent, but they won't buy.
Yeah, well, maybe that one customer will. It's really hard to fund a company with one customer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, yeah.
So what's been some of the biggest surprises? And you retired, you came out, now you're CEO of Velocidata. What are some of the surprises?
I think that one surprise, I think when you're not involved with early stage companies, what you know about them is what you read and what you hear, kind of at the water fountain, if you will, right? Or over a beer, right? And what you hear about is the success stories about how, we got our A round on Tuesday and we IPO'd on Friday, and it's wonderful.
Yeah.
This is
the sexiness of startups.
That's right. This is incredibly hard work, and you need a lot of tenacity, and you have to be willing to fail because you're going to fail. If you try new things, you will fail. You need to be willing to get off of what you're on if it's not working quickly and pivot and do something else. So I think agility. I came from an environment maybe different than you, even at HP, where I was largely in markets that were already defined. They were mature markets, and we were innovating product features in those markets, but there was a market. We kind of have a technology, and we're looking for something to solve with it. So we're trying to define markets, and that's been challenging, and I think exciting at the same time. So.
Yeah, but that's also, like you said, though, it's not unique from the standpoint of also getting a culture that's willing to experiment.
Absolutely.
Because, look, HP or even IBM, known as, having IBM Research or HP Labs or Xerox PARC, right? Mm-hmm. You can have a group of people who are really good at experimenting. The rest of the organization act as the antibody.
Absolutely.
And
right.
totally just crush those ideas. So what's been the change in the dynamics? Because you were on the board. Now you're the CEO going back to the board on things like, we got to take these experimentations, we got to take risks.
And burn some money in doing so, right? I mean, there's obviously an expense associated with even a small company. I've had a really good experience. Our board investors have been very supportive. They obviously want to see a return on invested capital. They're not doing this as a hobby. This is something that they do as a business. We're funded by a private equity company out of Philadelphia and a private investor, a guy who used to be the chairman and CEO of Motorola, again, Chris Galvin. And so he's lived in an innovative world. Motorola certainly was a very innovative company. Mm-hmm. So he's been very, very supportive. Also the fact, I think I got a little bit of a hall pass because they asked me to come and help.
They're not going to grind on you. Right?
Yeah, there's certainly a period of anti-grinding, if you will. I do want to react to a couple of your comments about antibodies. Agility is really important, the ability to move quickly. So we brought in agile programming techniques, which I'd used previously. And this little team of pretty young guys, I mean, they're young to me anyways, but they took to it amazing. If you come into our office, it's stickies all around the room, et cetera. So agility and development's been very important. The willingness to move has been important. The acceptance that we're going to have to move, that we're going to have to pivot and do something else,
right,
and do that quickly has been really important for us. And that's been different than in a big company. Things move slower.
Well, it is. I mean, and that's probably been my big surprise at Cable Labs, coming from HP with 120,000 employees to 200. When I started, we were 130.
Yep.
About you can move fast. It was kind of interesting because Jeffrey Moore, the author of Crossing the Chasm, Jeffrey's a longtime friend, and I was just had joined Cable Labs maybe 3 or 4 months, and Jeffrey came out with a new edition of Crossing the Chasm, and he asked to be on the podcast. So I did a podcast interview with him, and you can go back and you can find it in the archive if you're interested. But he points out, he was laughing because there was an experience at HP where the HP board brought him in, and he comes in and meets with me like right before the board, and he goes, "So why are they asking me about innovation and not talking to you?"
Yeah.
I'm like, well, it's the proverbial, they want the outside expert. You're an insider type of thing. And then, but Jeffrey reminded me of the story. He goes, yeah. He says, now you're the CEO at Cable Labs. It's like, you used to complain about CEOs being the problem. You're the problem.
You're the problem now.
Right.
You're it now.
You're it. There's nobody to look to say, oh, they don't get it, or they're not supporting, or
exactly.
Why
are they being such a problem?
Why are they being
they?
You're the problem now. So
that's
been probably a little bit of the eye opener for me. So we're gonna take another quick commercial break. When we come back, we're gonna pick up our conversation, and I'm gonna ask Barry to kind of think back on his career and think about what would be the 3 pieces of advice you would have given a 20-year-old version of yourself now that you got all this experience and expertise. So stay right there. We're going to be right back. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the Biz Talk Radio Network.
Biz Talk Radio.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovator's Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome to Killer Innovations. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. This week, we're having a conversation with Barry Rudolph, retired executive from IBM who, something like me, doesn't understand what the word retirement is.
Yeah, I failed retirement 101, that's for sure. But it's been fun.
My wife reminds me of that all the time. I've retired twice. The first one lasted a little over about a year and a half, I guess, and this one lasted 5 months. So my wife is like, stop using the R word. It's not going to happen. It's totally meaningless to you. But so you had a long, successful career at IBM. Now you're doing coaching, mentoring, board seats, and then on a board you sat on, got convinced to
become the CEO.
CEO, get back in the saddle, and get in the saddle again here. So as you look back across your career, and this is a question I like to ask, all guests who kind of had this very varied background, is if hindsight's 20/20. If you look back, what would be kind of those 2 or 3 pieces of advice that would you give to a 20-year-old Barry, just starting out before they got their career even going?
That's a really wonderful question. Yeah. And for the listeners, you would theoretically think I had a lot of time to think about it. In the break, I didn't because we were talking the whole time. But I will maybe talk about it in the context of my own career. So I had worked for IBM for 10 years before I ever got to talk to a customer. I was in the lab, and I knew, I was in the lab. That's what I did. And so one piece of advice is go out and see people that actually really use what you do earlier in your career. Find a way to do that. I actually ran a task force. We had a problem with a product before it was going to go into general availability, and I ran a little group of some very, very smart people to solve the problem. And I had the opportunity to then go talk to the customer about what we learned and what we solved and how we solved it. And it was absolutely career-changing to me, because this was hard disk drive stuff, right? So I had scanning electron microscope pictures and had all the morphology of the particles and the exact chemical compounds that were on the disk, et cetera. And I'm in a room with a bunch of guys who are responsible for the data center. And I get done with it all, and they go, yeah, that's really cool, thanks. But I want to talk to you about software and interfaces and the user experience. And it's all in the area that I'm working in. I don't have any clue what they're talking about. And so I went back to the ranch and found smart people that knew. I'm writing down words on a piece of paper, right? I don't even know what they mean, but I'm okay. And in fact, one of the guys asked me, so you're in that business, right? Yeah, but I don't really know what you're talking about. And subsequent to that, I actually anointed myself as their partner. We were putting a partnership programming in place. And I had about a 10-year relationship with this customer. It was one of the big phone companies, the Arbox in the Pacific Northwest. It was career-changing to me to know what really matters to customers and the breadth of what they do and really expanding the breadth of what you understand. So that's one comment I'll make that I would really advise. Do that early. It'll change your life. It'll change how you view if you're no matter what you do. If you're a developer, you're manufacturing and supply chain. Work with your customers. Another one is kind of around the notion of team, and we have that at Velocity. It's an amazingly smart group of guys. Half the development team have PhDs. They're just brilliant, wonderful people. But I always found that it was great if you kind of assessed your skills and your capabilities and found out what you were bad at. And I used to even play a little mind game with myself that I'm in a conference room and all the big mucky mucks that scare the bejesus out of me are in the room, and they're asking me questions. What am I absolutely the most petrified with? What areas, what skill sets, whatever. And either learn that by getting a team around you that can help you learn, or augment your own capability. So I'm a really linear thinker. Like a classic engineer. Here's the data, here's the variables, here's the equation, here's the answer in a box at the bottom. And I always wanted to have people around me that I used to call orthogonal thinkers that would, guys like this. So Phil, how about this idea? And you say, stupid idea. Well, okay, how about this one? Stupid idea. How about this one? Brilliant idea. And I would have never thought of it in a million years. So that's the other thing, team and diversity of thought and kind of thinking about what your capabilities are and either learning more or surrounding yourself with people and colleagues that can help kind of augment what you're bad at. And everybody's bad at something and good at other things. So
yeah, it sounds like similar to the proverbial advice that everybody likes to give, right? Is hire people smarter than yourself.
Absolutely. And smarter than yourself in a context that they're just different. They think differently. The first time I ever, started working with some of these orthogonal thinkers, I'd go home and think, that's the craziest guy I've ever met in my life. But they came up with brilliant ideas that just weren't linear at all. And in some cases made a lot of money for the company. So those are two comments that come to mind around the team and kind of experiencing a broader set earlier in your career and thinking more broadly. I guess the last thing I would say is don't be afraid to put yourself out there. And I started my career in big organizations, which can be a little intimidating. They're very structured. There's management chains and, et cetera, right? But I tried to find things. I always wanted to do my job that I was really responsible for, but always tried to extend myself beyond that and find out something different, something new, even in different departments or different parts of the company, and kind of take some risk inside even big companies. If you're focused on what matters, which in my opinion is the customer and doing the right thing with the customer, you can do stupid stuff and get away with it. I mean, people will still say,
people
that's
are
okay.
Actually pretty tolerant if you're open and
exactly
and tell them what you're doing and why you're doing
exactly
it.
Right.
So Barry, really quick, if people want to follow what you're doing, what's the best way to keep track of what you're up to?
Well, probably by email if anybody wants to talk to me, and I'm certainly happy to provide that. I don't know if you do that on your site.
We can do it on the show notes. We can do it on the show notes, so we can put that over there. But also they can track down Velocity data.
Yeah, they can track data. So we have a Velocity website. We're on LinkedIn. Et cetera. So those are things that they can certainly. And if anybody has ideas or anything, et cetera, for this wonderful, amazing streaming technology, I'd love to learn from your audience as well.
Great. So I'll post all that over on the show notes, so you can get in contact with Barry. Thanks a lot for coming to the show. So we're going to wrap this up. Hop on over to killinnovations.com, check out the show notes, and you'll be able to get all the downloads and links and all that are over there. Also, show archive going back to March of 2005, so you can search for just about any topic you can think of. So with that, we're gonna sign off for this week. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us. Podcast will be out on Tuesday, as is normal, and we'll see you next week. Catch you later. Bye-bye.
The opinions you hear on Biz Talk Radio are those of the hosts, callers, and guests, and do not necessarily reflect those of this station, Biz Talk Radio, its management, or advertisers. The information on Biz Talk Radio does not constitute a recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or service. If you have any questions about Biz Talk Radio, contact us at 817-274-1609 or at biztalkradio.com. Biz Talk Radio.
Autism. 1 out of every 68 children in America are impacted across every race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic group. If you aren't directly affected, someone you know is. Today's world doesn't support those on the autism spectrum. It needs hacking for us to truly welcome those who think and create differently than ourselves. We're Hacking Autism, a nonprofit charity with a mission to hack therapy, technologies, and career opportunities that improve the personal and professional lives of people on the autism spectrum. We believe that everyone can play a role in supporting those on the autism spectrum so that they can show their unique talents and abilities in this fast-paced world. You aren't powerless in this fight. Use your gifts and talents to make a positive impact. Join us in making a difference. Go to hackingautism.org to learn more.
Carpenters have their hammers and saws, chefs have their outfitted kitchens, and musicians have their instruments. A craftsman's ability to do their job is dependent on having the right tools. So where does an innovator, someone who takes an idea and makes it real, find the right tools to do their job? Outfit your innovator's garage by visiting innovation.tools. Innovation.tools is an online store created by innovators for innovators. It's where you will find tested and proven tools to help you create that next great product or service. These tools include books, audio training, video training, brainstorming how-tos, and much, much more. And for a limited time, listeners of Killer Innovations will get 25% off on your first order by using the discount code RADIO at checkout. And 100% of our profits from your purchases will be donated to charity. So go to innovation.tools and create that next great innovation.
Rwanda is a shining example of how the global community can come together and rebuild a country after a devastating genocide. But there is still more that needs to be done. In the rural villages, students are crowded into schools with no electricity, no running water, no internet access, and limited sanitation. Will these kids be ready to continue the rebuilding of Rwanda, or will they be dependent upon others? Through education and employment, boys and girls have an equally promising future that can transform their struggling communities. For $20 a month, a child can be educated and a community strengthened. By supporting Pioneer Education Africa, a 501c3 charity, you partner with others to provide education that will prepare a generation to take on the task of self-reliance. 100% of the proceeds received go directly to the education of the children. Visit pioneereducationafrica.com to find out more.